A simple handicap for Thursday, October 3rd. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. We got the day right. We got the date right. We're off to a good start. Let's get into the market rundown for this Thursday morning and get you on your way. NFL Week 5 kicks off tonight with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta still a minus 1.5-point favorite. Total saw a bit of over money yesterday. We're now up to 44. Chris Circa Buckeye. Bet online. All the books that influenced the market saw that number get up to the key of 44 with some over money in yesterday. What you need to know about the game tonight: Atlanta will be without Troy Anderson, the key linebacker in the middle of that defense. Tampa Bay will be without Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer, wide receivers number 3 and number 4. They will have Godwin. They will have Evans. And Bucky Irving, according to reports from Mr. Fowler, will be the featured part of the offense. At least that's what the Buccaneers are game planning towards. A shift fantasy owners everywhere have long wanted since the season got going. Perhaps it means a little less Rachaad White, a little more Irving. Interesting report to see it come out and reference specifically the game plan of the Buccaneers. Not too sure what to make of it entirely, but the prop market's certainly going to be a buzz between now and kickoff with some back and forth between whether or not we see White, whether or not we see Irving. How is that going to be handled? I don't really have an opinion on that one personally, but it's something that everybody should be mindful of as you go into this game tonight. Heading over to the Sunday games, it's the New York Jets on the road in London taking on the Vikings, who are also on the road, but when you're in the default of introducing the road team first, you get stuck on that here on the podcast. So both teams obviously flying to London to play at Hotspur Stadium. 50% chance of rain. Wind still at 15 miles per hour as the peak speed. Not too sure what to make of the weather. We got the report yesterday from Kevin Roth. Wasn't too sure what to make of it either. It's a bit of a late decision to potentially look at if there's going to be a weather impact on this game in London. Knee impact for Aaron Rodgers isn't being made out to sound like it is too significant. Kind of what was anticipated, as we talked about on the show. Looks like he is going to be just fine and good to go, albeit potentially slightly limited in mobility, but nothing too severe nor significant is being made of that injury, as it was downplayed by both him and Robert Salah yesterday. For Minnesota, pretty clean injury report. Hawkinson is designated to return, but there's no anticipation that he would be playing in this game for the Minnesota Vikings. Still 2.5 for the Vikings across the board. If anything, could point to a little bit of Jets money yesterday, late afternoon coming in and kicking out the 2.5 minus 120s. Total 42 down to a flat 40, still holding steady at Chris this morning. Carolina on the road at the Chicago Bears, 3.5, the number minus 120 for the Bears at Chris, Circa, and Buckeye. 4 still holding steady at BetOnline and Pinnacle. 4 showing at DK and FanDuel as well. 41.5 is the total across the board. From the Panthers side, Josie Jewell was officially labeled by head coach Dave Canales to be missing that game, confirming what was speculated. Waiting to see more from Shai Tuttle, the nose tackle in the middle of that Panthers defense. That would be the name that I'm continuing to look at this Thursday morning. Did the show with Sam P in the recording. Did the live stream preview as well. Thank you very much if you joined the live stream preview. You're on Apple or Spotify this morning. Episodes down below in your podcast feed. If you're watching this live on YouTube, the live stream preview is here on the channel as well. So you can go back and listen to it. Every game is time-stamped. You can get a deep dive into this game. Talked about how I like the Bears minus 3.5 in this game, but we were ultimately not able to get to a point where we could release it on the service. Looking at Chicago in this game as a offense, getting the ground game going last week as a priority with an absolute opportunity to do it again this week. Also looking at a Bears offense that continues to improve, and now the Panthers face a much more difficult defensive test with Andy Dalton than what they faced in the Raiders and what they faced last week in the Bengals. This Bears defense has been a unit that has been quietly overperforming all season long. I think it's a good matchup on both sides for the Bears. And when you think about the Bears closing -3 last week against the Rams, you're at -3.5 here at home against the Panthers. It's a lot of respect putting on the Carolina Panthers that I don't necessarily agree with. Baltimore Ravens on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. Lots to talk about in this game. From the Bengals side on the injury front, B.J. Hill limited at practice. That's step 1 of 3 steps the Bengals defensive line needs to get right. He is back in limited fashion. Trey Hendrickson, limited fashion as well. Sounds a little bit more pessimistic from the team about Hendrickson's status for this game than what was being implied earlier in the week. Let's see if that neck stinger keeps him potentially limited or at doubt for this game as the practice reports go on. Still no Sheldon Rankins, but anybody coming back on that defensive line is better than not having all three. Yesterday afternoon, about 2 p.m. Pacific time, there was a release from a big group that played not only Cincinnati at plus 2.5, also played the under at 50.5. So we saw Bengals money, we saw under money, and there was another podcast that's popular. There was a bet given out by one of the respected folks on that show on the Cincinnati Bengals as his best of the week too, and that was a little bit before the group released it. So you're having kind of a respected play from a show and then a very respected play from a betting group as double confirmation on the Bengals. There's 2.5 this morning for the Ravens, laying the points on the road, minus 120 at Chris, minus 115 at Circa, minus 110 at Buckeye and Bet Online. So there was a good wave of Bengals money yesterday just after lunch Pacific time that carried through, took out the threes. That's why we're back to 2.5. When you're looking at why did the total come down, it's because of that betting group later in the afternoon that played the under that pulled this number down. Buffalo on the road at the Houston Texans. For Houston, you have Tank Dell back at practice. Still no Joe Mixon, and Laramie Tunzel becoming a little bit in doubt for this game as well. Thursday practice will confirm a lot of that as we figure out what we're getting. For Buffalo, Khalil Shakir is the big name on the injury report that popped up yesterday. You're also looking at Dion Dawkins on the offensive line as a name to watch. But Teron Johnson, as well as Terrell Bernard, both have a chance to return. That would be massive for the Bills defense, which has struggled in the middle and really got exposed against the Baltimore Ravens. But if you get your best nickel cornerback and you get your best linebacker back for this game against the Texans, would be a huge win for the Bills. Again, we're still looking at betting group on the Houston Texans +1, another betting group on the Buffalo Bills +1. Every time this number's moved, it's been taken, it's been bet, and we're kind of locked in the middle of that so far today. Buffalo, Houston here still with a total of 47.5 left to right across the screen. Indianapolis on the road at the Jacksonville Jags. Jags up to a full 3-point favorite at Chris this morning, minus 105 at Circa, minus 105 at Buckeye. A little bit of money on the home favorite coming in. Total in this game, 45.5, now out to a standing number of 46.5 at Chris, 46 everywhere else across the screen for the majority. For Indianapolis, there is now a bit of a flip. I was looking at this, again, as both Richardson and Taylor at best 50-50 to play in this game. Thought it was potentially more likely to see Taylor than we would see Richardson. And now today, as it stands after what we heard yesterday, it sounds like Richardson potentially more likely to play than Taylor is likely to play. If you look at RotoWorld from NBC, you see that Taylor is most likely to miss the game. If you're looking at more direct injury reports from the team itself, it sounds like he has a chance to play. If you get deep into the Twitter doctor rabbit hole, you're finding out that it's the same ankle that he got the procedure on earlier in his career that in ways prevented the ankle injury from being as severe as it could have. I still think the 50-50 designation on both holds true. And when you combine that with pay and more on the defensive side, along with the existing defensive injuries they've suffered in the last week or two, you get a Colts team that has a lot of uncertainty. Now, unfortunately, the market's pricing this one pretty correctly, and we're out to Jags -3 with Evan Ingram back on a limited basis. Looks like he could very well go for the Jags on offense. Interesting matchup from the total perspective. If it happens to be Joe Flacco, do we see things like last year for the Browns late in the season where he came in, the pass rate over expectation spiked? Last week we saw Flacco throw 26 pass attempts in 3 quarters. Richardson's high on the season playing the full game prior was 33. So Flacco almost eclipsed that in 3 quarters in a game where the Colts were up as many as 17 points. You probably see with Flacco a Colts offense throwing the football a lot more, especially if Taylor is out as well. Think about the Jags beat up middle of the defense as well as missing their best corner and a unit that plays a ton of man coverage. There's a path for both teams to move the ball. We just don't know who's going to be moving it for the Colts. which makes this a little tough to make a decision at the point. But the side getting to 3 was pretty anticipated, but it's just unfortunate that it's priced in so correctly because the Jags do look like the side, but not a number that you can play at -3. Miami on the road at the New England Patriots. Pats a pick'em at Chris this morning. -1 at Circa. Pick at Buckeye. Total as low as 35. It is now back to 36, shaded to the over. Bad news for the New England Patriots as they lose David Andrews, the center, best offensive lineman that they have. He will miss the remainder of the season with a serious shoulder injury. Jalen Phillips for the Miami Dolphins ruled out for the season as well. Their best player in the defensive front seven. You can say they're contrasting blows on either side, but the fact is the Patriots lose another key part of their team, the biggest leader in the locker room on the offensive side of the football. The Dolphins lose their best player in the front seven. Both of these teams just riddled with injuries. Tyreek Hill wakes up. He's tweeting about trade news surrounding him. There's speculation. Mike McDaniel can barely speak at the press conference. My hands are up on this one. Now, the case that I made when you're looking at the total of 35.5 when I was speaking on the podcast was that the Pats have played a pretty brutal schedule of opposing defenses. And the Dolphins have faced a pretty brutal schedule of opposing defenses. You obviously have Snoop Huntley starting for the Miami Dolphins. You have Jacoby Brissett starting for the New England Patriots. There's injuries all over. But when does too low become too low? The answer seemed to come in yesterday after the stream as those 35 and 35.5s were taken out. And we're out to a new high for the week as we're seeing it at 36.5 this morning. Majority of that movement came right around 10 a.m., 10:45 a.m. yesterday Pacific time. So wave of over money into the market pushing this up. You're at a pretty important number nearing at 36 and 37, but it is a relatively low total with a very small sample size. For that, it's just another tough game on a tough card. Cleveland on the road at Washington. You want to speak about tough. Commanders 3 -20 left to right across the screen. Very few 3.5 showing this morning. No good news for the Cleveland Browns. Pochik not at practice. You're not having Conklin or Wills at practice either. You have an O-line that has allowed the most pressures in the NFL through 4 weeks. 66 of them in 4 games. Just ridiculous. Doesn't look like reinforcements are coming, even with David Njoku potentially back. What are you going to do from an offensive standpoint for the Cleveland Browns, who are just incredibly broken on offense at this point? Washington, on the other side, very clean injury report on both fronts of the football. Not a whole lot to say here. We know the price on Washington is high, but is it justified based on how they played and how many issues the Cleveland Browns have on the offensive side of the football? Las Vegas on the road at the Denver Broncos. A release from another pro yesterday morning on Las Vegas +3. Messaged him and I don't agree with that one. We're looking now, the Broncos back to 3 -105. The 2.5s did not hold up for very long. Devontae Adams not set to play in this game based on reports. I think it's fair to say that he's fully checked out of the Raiders. There was the Diana Rossini interview, their tweet rather, that came out yesterday about 4 p.m. Pacific time. She's like, even if he is traded, the hamstring injury is real. Make of that what you will. I think it's fair to say that he is in no way playing for the Raiders anytime soon. With that said, Max Crosby on the defensive side, a DNP yesterday. He said that he wants to try play. His status perhaps suggesting otherwise. Pretty tough to discern through that, but it is now a Raiders team without without their best offensive player, most likely. We can put probably 95% plus on that of Adams not playing. When it comes to Max Crosby, I think he's in that Richardson-Taylor range of a true 50-50 coin flip. How much of the Raiders' comeback against the Browns was because the Raiders are buying back into what is going on versus the Browns being kind of checked out in their own right? I think it's a fair debate to make. And now you have the Raiders going on the road to play a very good Broncos defense that's been fantastic against the run all season. And Antonio Pierce wants Alexander Mattison to be the featured back because he wasn't satisfied with Zamir White, who, by the way, was also on the injury report. Hard to make a case for the Raiders, in my opinion, but with this number at 3 and a total this short and Bo Nix seemingly incapable of pushing the ball down the field, you don't get a lot of confidence in backing the Broncos either. It's just a tough week continues, but that release was quickly bought back upon as we are now back out to -3. Arizona on the road at the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers still holding steady as a 7-point favorite across the board. Total littered with 50s. We're seeing that at Chris. We're seeing that at Buckeye. We're seeing that at Bet Online. We're seeing that at Jazz as well. 49.5s everywhere else across the screen. News for Arizona is good for the tight end, Trey McBride. He is back at practice. He looks set to return and play in this game for Arizona. That is massive. Still looks like Beachum at right tackle with no other resources to come in and fill in or make any changes. That's a bit of a problem for Arizona and continues to be. But with McBride back, that certainly gives them matchup opportunities. From the 49ers side, you got to watch Fred Warner. This is a massive Fred Warner game for the 49ers. It's also a big Hufanga game as well, matched up against the heavier personnel of the Arizona Cardinals. But from a 49ers game planning perspective, think about what the Bills did to this Cardinals defense. Think about what the Detroit Lions did to this Arizona Cardinals defense. The 49ers are built to do exactly that at a much more effective level. This is a brutal matchup for the Arizona Cardinals on defense. Green Bay on the road at the LA Rams. Packers 3 minus 115 left to right across the screen. Total from 44.5 up to 48.5. We're seeing the first 49s show on the board this morning at Circa Sports down in Las Vegas. 48.5 everywhere else. Across the screen, Darius Williams designated to return from IR, the Rams' best corner. Boy, do they need help at defensive back. Still unclear if he's going to be able to play or not. I'm not fully sure what to make of that report. We do know Christian Watson will be out for the Packers. Brutal matchup for the Rams defensively in this game, getting the Packers on turf. Equally brutal matchup for the Packers on the other side, facing this Rams offense with Matthew Stafford. That's a tough matchup as well. Both of these teams indoors on the fast surface. I will say, agree with the way the total is moving, but we're getting pretty high here at 49. And let's see if this total continues to tick up. Giants on the road at the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks 6 or 6.5, depending where you look. There was a release from another betting group, as well as they played it, pushed the 6s back up to 6.5. Giants money earlier in the week. Wednesday, the limits go up. There's a bump across the board. See that group chime in, push the 6 to 6.5. Total from 42 up to 44. Interesting to see Seattle bet, and you think about what the Giants offense is with Malik Nabers. Now we have a bit of a divide in the injury report. Nabers was officially a DNP on Wednesday. A lot of rabbit holes to go down. Second time I've used that phrase today. On injury reporting, especially relating to the concussion protocol. From a betting perspective in my chair, as I see it, what I fully understand is there is a 5-step protocol that players have to clear. You have to go through each step one day at a time. You can't pass 2 steps in one day. That's why it's becoming so unlikely when a player gets hurt on Sunday and plays the next week that they're able to clear the protocol, because everything has to go right without any setbacks. We know timeline-wise, early portion of the season, it seems subjectively like teams are being very conservative with the concussions and how they're handled and how players progress through the protocol. Late in the year seems to get much more lenient. The big news in this game was that Malik Nabers was a DNP in the protocol, which we knew. They had the extra time for him to get clearing through the protocol as he was placed in it last Friday following the Cowboys game on Thursday night. I think there was even an announcement Thursday night that he was officially in it. The non-DNP, or the DNP, pardon me, is non-certain about what step the player is in. Because Nabers didn't practice, we don't know if he's in step 2. We don't know if he's in step 3. We don't know if he's even made it to step 1 or cleared through that yet, because there's no extra information provided with that. Now, with that said, you see this group chime in, which is very plugged in and has a lot of good info. Bet on Seattle in a game where, if you're just comparing this game at Seattle -6 to either the Dolphins game where Skylar Thompson closed 4 on the road in this game, if you're looking back to Bo Nix in his debut, closed -6, and you're seeing the Giants there, I don't think anybody puts the full version of the Giants at a Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle level, nor a Bo Nix rookie quarterback debut scenario in Lumen against a healthy Seahawks team, because the Seahawks have a ton of injuries in their own right on the defensive side. But if you take Malik Nabers, who has contributed more individually to the Giants offense than any other player has to his respective team in targets and offensive output. What is this Giants offense? You add in the fact now that Devin Singletary is banged up and not practicing either. He's the running back that Brian Daboll trusts the most. That bet to me from the group signals that there's something going on here with Neighbors, and there's a good chance that Neighbors is not going to clear protocol and play on Sunday, because I have a hard time getting to timing-wise on a Wednesday afternoon with this number that saw Giants money earlier in the week, bringing it down. I have a hard time getting to a spot that I'm putting myself in the scenario of, with all these Seahawks defensive injuries, saying, yes, Seattle's the play here, and the Giants are, in effect, worse than that Bo Nix Broncos debut team. They're worse than what we saw Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle. And they have the rest advantage that's significant with the extra 3 days, plus the extra day that Seattle was playing on Monday Night Football and had to travel back. Saturday is a travel day for the Giants, so Neighbors is going to have to be back at practice at minimum in a limited participation today. From what I understand, if that doesn't happen, I don't understand how he can clear with just Friday to get through it. So I think Neighbors is very much in doubt for this game. And if that is the case, this Giants offense, there's not much there. There just isn't. And that's a tough spot. And so I thought that bet yesterday was very telling that came into the market. Cowboys on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh 2.5 up to minus 115 at Chris. Minus 115 at BetOnline as well. Minus 110 everywhere else across the screen. Over money yesterday in the game pushed this one up to 44. The Monday Night Football, it's the Saints on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. KC a 5.5-point favorite across the board. Total is 43. It's our only bet and our only release of the week. Kansas City minus 5.5. There's another group, as we talked about, released it earlier in the week at 5, pushed it up to 6. There was resistance at 6, pushed it back. We released 5.5, pushed it to 6.5. Same guys came back. Welcome to the NFL in 2024. There's a back and forth on a little bit of everything and a little bit of anything on every game that we're seeing on the sides and totals so far through 4 weeks and change, now getting in to week number 5. Appreciate everyone, as always, for stopping by. I will put a caveat. There is a slight chance there will not be a podcast episode tomorrow, as the wife and I are dealing with some personal life stuff. No, not a bad thing in any way. It's just something that we have to occupy some time with a little bit later today. And so bit of travel involved in that too. We're just sorting through some things. So if I'm not on the podcast feed tomorrow morning, or I'm not in the YouTube feed, that would be why. Don't know exactly how the day is going to play out, but I'll keep everybody updated with a tweet as well. And if you see me on the reaction pod tomorrow night on the channel, that'll be a pretty good indication. But I'll try to find a place to record and get things sorted. It's a rare couple hours away from home that typically doesn't happen during the NFL season. So if there is no pod, that's why, but I'll do my best to get back for a final Friday market rundown. And as a reminder, that Wednesday preview diving into all of the games is up on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube as well. If you enjoyed the episode today and you're watching on YouTube, please consider hitting the subscribe button, leaving a thumbs up, as well as if you're listening on Apple or Spotify and you want to take a second to leave a review in your podcast player, I would appreciate it very much. Have a fantastic Thursday, everybody. Hopefully, we'll chat to you tomorrow morning.